My name is Claire Dalton. The moment I saw the text that read, "Meet me tonight. Don't tell him everything I believed about my life split in two." They say betrayal arrives quietly. Mine came like a siren, a single message that turned everyday light into a forensic lamp. I should say up front, I never imagined I would become the kind of person who looks at receipts and calendars the way a detective reads fingerprints. But when it's your life on the line, you learn to see evidence where everyone else sees comfort. We lived in the kind of house that rented respect, colonial facade, warm porch light, our names on a mailbox. To the outside world, Michael, my husband, and I were inventory perfect. He worked long hours at a mid-sized tech firm in Atlanta. I managed our home and a small online consultancy. We smiled at neighbor barbecues. We had dinner rituals. We had a marriage that looked like it knew its lines. Subtle things started to fray first: his phone tucked face down, a sudden preference for late meetings he couldn't explain, a credit card charge that read like someone else's dinner. I noticed them and filed them away, not out of denial, but because the pattern of betrayal is slow enough to look like fatigue. And then I found the misplaced ticket receipt, 300 miles away, the same weekend Michael said he had a lead. It was a hole in the story big enough to fall through. My heart dove first, logic followed. I tailed him, not like a cartoon war hero but like a woman taking note. The affair was not cinematic at first. It was a room at a boutique hotel, coffee-smudged receipts, a name on a calendar, Elena. When I confronted him, he didn't scream. He didn't grovel. He seemed surprised I'd found out, not because he expected me to never see, but because he'd assumed I would choose to. That casual dismissal felt like humiliation stitched into my flesh. Pain is a peculiar currency. At first it buys tears, later it buys clarity. I watched Michael move like he was still the man I had married, warm, competent, practiced. But behind that choreography was a woman I'd never met, someone who moved with the casual entitlement of a person who has decided they can rewrite another person's life and call it progress. Elena was younger, skilled at apologetic laughter and the precise tenderness he'd gone missing on me. She had the thing most dangerous to marriages: plausible sincerity. The discovery didn't make me collapse. Instead, it was like turning a page and seeing a photograph of my life with a corner ripped out. The anger was immediate, raw, and then, incubating beneath it, a cold calculation. Humiliation can be corrosive if kept secret. It becomes power when you do something methodical with it. I am not a violent woman. I will not break bones to prove a point. My revenge, if you can call it that, would be surgical and within the law. The moment of decision came in Michael's study, when I opened his laptop and saw the files, contracts, partnership agreements, an internal fund transfer signed on his behalf, and a neat trail of emails that used his executive access to move client funds toward a shell entity. He had been convenient at home and precise at work, an affair, and corporate betrayal in parallel. 2 betrayals, 1 man. The legal part was a gray zone, but not impossible. I hired a lawyer, Elaine Carter, a woman who smelled of coffee and careful contempt for sloppiness. Elaine looked at the documents and smiled a small, dangerous smile. That smile is a thing I learned to love. She explained the apparatus of corporate accountability, forensic accounting, subpoena power for emails, the chain of custody for digital evidence. It was satisfying to hear the terms that would make his actions undeniable: misappropriation, breach of fiduciary duty, fraud. I felt something like moral clarity. The pieces of my broken life had become exhibits. I collected proof the way a sculptor collects stone. I printed emails, captured metadata, photographed receipts, and began to build a narrative that could be read in court and consumed by the public. I logged every late-night text, every evasive answer, every transfer. I secured witnesses, a junior admin who had seen Michael's late-night transfers and a contractor who had been asked to obscure billing dates. They were frightened at first, but fear becomes manageable when you give people a path out of complicity. truth under oath and protection for their careers. We filed claims quietly. Elaine did not leak, she prepared. The firm's internal counsel thought they could manage it with a private settlement. Michael thought he could buy silence with a resignation and a non-disclosure. He underestimated the physics of what happens when you break someone's life. The debris doesn't settle neatly. My approach was not spectacle, it was inevitability. As the investigation unfolded, I kept my face like stone. At home I wore gratitude like a mask. Michael tried to maintain normalcy, breakfasts, small talk, his practiced hands on my back at night, but the things he had stolen had become anchors that pulled him down. The company froze his access. The board convened in hushed conference rooms. The media, the one place that turns corporate malfeasance into public pressure, was patient. Elaine knew how to time a story. You can break a man in private, but to make the law hold, sometimes you must let the court of public opinion do its work. There were nights when rage returned like a physical thing, hot, animal, impossible to ignore. But we always returned to evidence, timestamps, wire transfers, signed approvals. The legal team served subpoenas. The forensics report showed manipulation of account privileges. When corporate auditors read the chain of commands, Michael's keyboard strokes glowed like a confession. I never wanted him to go to jail. I wanted him to lose the thing he had used to betray me, his power, his public credibility, the clean life he'd let everyone believe in. The law obliges consequences proportionate to the crime. Elaine pushed for restitution measures and civil suits that would require him to return the misappropriated funds, to publicly accept accountability, and to relinquish any executive positions. It was a surgical dismantling of his privilege. On the day the lawsuit became public, Michael's face was different. It was not the face of a man surprised by consequences, it was the face of someone who realized he had played with a machine he did not understand. The headlines were not explicit about the affair, they were clinical: executive resigns amid allegations of misappropriation. To those outside our house, the story was about corporate ethics. To me, it was about truth. There were hearings. Depositions felt like the stripping of a performance. He tried to craft plausible narratives: clerical error, an assistant's mistake, a misinterpretation of his sign-off. Each claim was a stitch that Elaine and the auditors unraveled with a calm, expert hand. The documents were merciless. The junior admin testified. The contractor's emails were admitted. In legalese, his responsibility became a chain reaction. The settlement terms were precise and public. He was to return a substantial portion of the funds, pay penalties, and accept a permanent ban from executive roles at similar firms. He had to sign a statement acknowledging the misuse of client funds. There was no hush money that could reweave what he had done. That, I realized, would be the final humiliation, the loss of the very respect he had counted on. The court didn't give me vengeance, it gave me accountability. When the dust settled, Michael tried to bargain for private forgiveness. He offered small gestures, a dinner, a note, promises. I refused each one the way a surgeon refuses a bandage where you need a scar to teach. He could not buy back my trust. He had transferred it into something he could not name, documented, audited, and broken. In the aftermath, I watched him walk from our home with a small suitcase. He kept his head down. I did not wave. There was no theatrical confrontation. My revenge had been careful and lawful, my justice had been public and final. He was stripped of the power that had allowed his betrayal to grow. People ask if I am happy now. Happiness is too small a word. I am quieter, more dangerous in the way truth refines you. I wake up without the burden of pretending. I run my consultancy, I pay the bills, and my neighbors still nod. The house feels different, not because it is grander, but because the lie has been excised. Final reflection: betrayal teaches you to read a room for motive, a signature for intent, a pause for guilt. It taught me the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is a fantasy of exact payback. Justice is a structure that prevents the same harm from happening again. I wanted the latter. I wanted him held accountable in a way that would prevent him from harming someone else with the same small, precise cruelty. And that is the last day she ever had power over me. Not because I wanted to crush her, but because I wanted to be free from the quiet theft of a life I had built with my own hands. If this story moved you, if it made you feel the fracture and the slow recompense, please like, subscribe, and share. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Support Betrayal Nation and join a community that honors truth. Thank you.